evening. Welcome to the Festival Hall in Kirkby and Ashfield for the second live political debate on BBC Radio Nottingham. We're up in the sports hall of this leisure centre, home to a gym, children's classes, roller skating in the centre of Kirkby. It's also the venue for the electoral count 2 weeks today. Politicians are chasing the so-called women's vote. Last time around in 2010 it was called the Mumsnet election. Before that in 1997 politicians were trying to convince the so-called Worcester woman, a key voter. So with 2 weeks to go before polling day, women are more likely to be still making their minds up. One survey suggests women are twice as likely to be undecided. So women voters are crucial to the outcome of this election. You'll hear some undecided voters and some party supporters in the all-female audience tonight as we try and discover what Ashfield women really want from their politicians. Discussing the big issues tonight on your panel, Simon Ashcroft representing UKIP, Mike Buchanan from Justice for Men and Boys, Gloria De Piero for the Labour Party, Helen Harrison for the Conservatives and Phil Smith from the Liberal Democrats. So before we started and got underway this evening, we drew lots to see who would start the debate. So we're going to have some opening statements from the candidates here in Ashfield. Simon Ashcroft from UKIP, you came out first, so in no longer than 1 minute, please, how are you going to win over the women of Ashfield?
Well, this is the first time in over 100 years that real change is on the horizon. All you need to do is vote for it. UKIP are offering real change and real policies. I'm a 52-year-old businessman who's never been in politics before. I've come into this for two reasons. Firstly, to protect our country and our future for our children and our grandchildren. Secondly, to put policies, real policies for real people. I'm fed up with career politicians, and I include Clegg, Cameron and Miliband, who've never really done a proper day's work in their lives. So I'm asking you, the people of Ashfield, the ladies of Ashfield, to vote for UKIP for real change.
Thank you very much. We're going to move now to Mike Buchanan from the Justice for Men and Boys Party. You have a minute.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Sarah, you and your colleagues at BBC Radio Nottingham should be thoroughly ashamed of the theme of this evening and the fact you have an all-female audience, thereby eliminating half the voters in Ashfield. My colleague Ray Barry is standing in the Broxtowe constituency, and you didn't even have the decency to invite him onto your candidate discussion last week. In your online trailer to this programme, you failed to mention the candidates' names and parties in Ashfield, so anyone relying on BBC Radio Nottingham for information would not know in advance that our party even exists. In our manifesto, we outline 20 areas in which the state assaults the human rights of men and boys through its actions and inactions. There are no areas where the state specifically assaults the human rights of women and girls. As the state broadcaster, the BBC also assaults men's and boys' human rights. We've published plenty of evidence of the BBC's deep anti-male bias. Last year I complained to the BBC about a piece on Newsnight about domestic violence, which perpetuated the myth of all victims being women and all perpetrators men. We sent in a letter with 54 breaches of BBC editorial guidelines.
OK, you've had your minute. Thank you very much. Let's move on to Phil Smith from the Liberal Democrats, your opening statement.
Well, I'm 52 and I'm a local businessman. I run a flower shop with my wife. So I know what the people of Ashfield are looking for because I see them all every day. For us, I think a key thing is education. We've introduced the pupil premium, which has given over £12 million worth of money into local education and improved our education figures locally exceptionally. We've also got the free school meals that we've introduced, which I think has helped a lot of people and has improved matters in general. I'm really concerned that we don't get tied up in non-direct issues here. I know there are some issues about tonight, but I think we need to talk about the people of Ashfield, particularly the ladies of Ashfield, and what they want and try and provide that to them. OK,
Phil Smith, thank you very much. Let's go to Helen Harrison representing the Conservatives in Ashfield.
I feel a bit uncomfortable about the question, how am I going to appeal to women? Because I'm here to represent everybody, male and female. So I hope that what I bring is going to appeal to all of you here in this audience, but to the men out there as well. I'm a physiotherapist. I work with people. I work with people who are scared and in pain. And they come to me needing to trust me. And I gain that trust by listening and caring. And I talk to people every day in a very straightforward manner. I don't believe in beating about the bush. I believe in being honest and straight with people. And I think those particular traits are going to be very, very welcome to everybody, really, because they're so fed up with not being given straight answers and they want to be listened to.
OK, let's hope we get some straight answers tonight at the live hustings here in Ashfield. Gloria De Piero.
Over the past 5 years in the job, I've met some amazing women, some inspiring women, actually many from the church who are running our food banks. But I have to say, I think it's wrong that anybody in the 6th richest country in the world is having to rely on food banks. So time and time again, over the past 5 years, I've heard the same thing, that life's been tough. It's never been as tough. And that miracle recovery from that George Osborne and Nick Clegg talk about, it's not reaching people here, it's not reaching families. Wages for women and men, actually, in Ashfield have gone backwards. Never mind accounting for pay, for price increases, they've actually gone backwards. So over the last 5 years, I have worked hard to sort out your problems, but there are too many problems that I can't sort out without a Labour government. So we'll scrap the cruel bedroom tax, we'll cut energy bills, we'll provide more childcare, we'll raise the minimum wage, we'll axe exploitative zero-hours contracts, and we'll take action on the gender pay gap. We'll guarantee that GP appointment again within 48 hours and rescue our NHS.
OK, thank you, Gloria De Piero for Labour. You're listening to BBC Radio Nottingham. It's our live hustings debate in the constituency of Ashfield. We have an invited audience of women, but obviously tens of thousands of people listening who are men and women to BBC Radio Nottingham, and hopefully lots of issues to be covered this evening. We're going to have our first question now, and questions brought to you by Peter Saul, BBC Radio Nottingham's political reporter.
Sarah, thank you. Well, we've heard the candidates' opening statements. I think it's right now that we turn to our invited audience here in Ashfield. And of course, the NHS is a big issue for many voters. And Pam Clark, it's a big issue for you, isn't it?
It is a big issue for me. So I want to know how we can be sure that there'll be a health service to look after our grandchildren and to look after us as we age.
This question first then to Helen Harrison of the Conservatives.
Thank you. The NHS is also an incredibly important issue to me. It won't surprise you, as a physiotherapist who's worked on the front line in the NHS and who is now a hospital governor of my local general hospital, I take a great interest in what's going on. I'm really pleased that our party has pledged the £8 billion a year that's going to be needed to fund the NHS over the next Parliament. I'm very proud of that, and that's possible because we're looking after the economy and getting it growing again. The thing that is most important about the NHS right now is that all the different parts of the NHS, including social care, are being brought together to work in an integrated fashion. That's absolutely vital. If we don't push that through and make that work, our NHS will be in trouble. But we are doing that work, and I'm really excited about it. As a physiotherapist, for the first time, I think we're finally pushing the NHS in the right direction.
OK, let's go to Simon Ashcroft of UKIP on this question. The question, how can we be sure that there'll be a health service that will cope with looking after our grandchildren and ourselves as we all get older?
The only way to assure that is to vote UKIP. We're the only party that's got a fully costed manifesto, and I have a leaflet here from the Labour Party that say about us charging for NHS. Let me say very clearly that the NHS is free at the point of use for UK citizens. We will preserve that for as long as we have some influence in British politics. Now, we're pledging £3 billion extra each year. That's 20,000 nurses, 8,000 doctors and 3,000 extra midwives. Your NHS is safe for your children and your grandchildren, as it is for mine. And I said earlier, that's the only reason that I'm in politics, for my children.
Those costings are based on withdrawing from the EU, yeah?
Well, they're not just based on withdrawing from the EU. It's also the fact that we will prioritise foreign aid so that we look after healthcare projects and water around the world. But we won't just give money to countries that have a space programme and nuclear weapons. We will spend your money here in the UK on your health service.
Simon Ashcroft of UKIP, thank you. Let's turn to Gloria De Piero of Labour. Question about the NHS. How can we ensure a future of the NHS?
So we created the NHS in 1945, we saved it in 1997, and I think we've got to save it again. So 20,000 more nurses, 8,000 more GPs, and a guaranteed GP appointment within 48 hours. How are we going to pay for it? We are going to ask those who live in houses worth more than £2 million to pay extra like on their council tax.
Has that been fully costed? Just today, the Institute of Fiscal Studies say the main parties are still leaving us in the dark about how you're going to pay for this.
So those are Treasury figures, so they're actually kind of government figures that we can raise that from the mansion tax. And it's really important that every promise is funded, because an unfunded promise, that's just a pipe dream. It's just hot air. Now, we know if this government get back in, then there will be cuts that are more extreme that we saw in the last 5 years. Now, I just want to say one thing about Nigel Farage, who very recently, it was a few years ago, said that he wanted an American-style health insurance system. Now, we've seen what happens in America. That means the rich can go to hospital and the poor can go to hell. And
Simon's disputing that.
Gloria, that's absolutely not true. We had a discussion. We had a discussion like every family discussed things, every party, every company discussed things. We had an open discussion and we decided the only way for our NHS is to be funded through taxation. So please, let's not go down that line again. NHS with UKIP is safe.
OK, Mike Buchanan, Justice for Men and Boys on the NHS.
Yes, Justice for Men and Boys is the only party that's speaking the truth about the NHS. It's known why the NHS is in crisis. For 40 years, there's been a deliberate increase in the proportion of doctors who are women, and the average female doctor on graduating will work half the hours over a career compared to men. You have to train 2 women to get the same work output as 1 man. And that's why the NHS is in crisis.
Louise, you're shaking your head at that, one of the audience members.
Look, a woman doctor costs the same as a male doctor, so it doesn't matter whether they're men or women. We need more doctors, more qualified staff in our hospitals, and we need people that can do the job. I want people that are trained. To be honest, when I go to the doctors, I'm happy if it's a man or a woman. I just want someone that's qualified and is funded by the state.
So it doesn't trouble you that it takes, the taxpayer. By the way, men pay 72% of the taxes in this country. And it doesn't trouble you that the state has to train 2 women for every man.
Sue, you want to say something?
Yeah, this seems to be a bit of a problem here, and I don't know what it is. You seem to have got a thing about women and men, and I'm not unsure what it is. The thing the ladies just pointed out, if I go to doctors, if I could get in my doctor, that's more to the point, if I could get in to see my doctor, I won't care if it's a gentleman or a lady. It's immaterial.
OK, let's move on to Phil Smith from the Liberal Democrats. This is a question about ensuring the future of the NHS.
Yes. I think the important thing is that we give the NHS the money and the funds it needs. We're committed to giving the NHS the £8 billion that they've asked for. As I understand it, Labour aren't. What we're saying here is that they've said they need that £8 billion. We've got a fully costed plan for giving them that. We're going to make sure that the NHS provides what's needed for the people that use it, as not just for broken arms and bits and pieces that happen as you go into the doctors, but also for mental health, an area that's been lost in the NHS for a long time.
Well, let's talk about mental health, because Pam, you used to work in mental health, didn't you?
Yes, it needs a lot of help and a lot of money. So does the NHS. But Gloria said all the things she's doing. What bothers me is where is the money coming from?
The mansion tax, everything in this manifesto, which I know it's radio, but I'm holding up here, everything is accounted for, every spending commitment funded. And that's really important, because people don't trust politics and politicians, and that's why we've made that specific promise. Everything is funded.
Well, there must be an awful lot of people for these promises that are going to pay the council tax, or living in £2 million houses. I live in housing association.
Gloria, you were criticising UKIP earlier for having the conversation about privatising the health service, and yet here in Ashfield we've got one of the most modern hospitals in the country. Kingsmill was updated to the tune of $320 million on a PFI deal, which many people have said has been disastrous for Ashfield. Repaying that debt is costing more than $3 million a month, and it was the Labour Party that brought that in.
So I'm really pleased that we rebuilt every single hospital in the country, Kingsmill and QMC. Now, I did write to the government, actually, and said, is PFI causing the problems at Kingsmill? And I got the letter, actually, and they said, no, it's not clear that it is. And I'll tell you what is interesting, because my people that I represented use QMC and Kingsmill. One, I don't think signed a particularly good PFI deal, I have to admit. But there's still...
Kingsmill didn't sign a PFI deal.
But 10-year highest A&E waiting times in both those hospitals. It's the government that's caused this crisis in our NHS. and don't let anybody tell you any different, because we didn't have these waiting times before.
Helen Harrison.
I think as a governor at my local general hospital, we have great long discussions about what's causing the problems with the A&E waiting times. And it's very clear that there's a huge number of different things all colliding at the same time to create this. So we have an expanding elderly population who are increasingly unwell and suffering from multiple illnesses. And they are struggling to get them out to the other side of the hospital because of difficulties with social care. So they're piling up at the front end of the hospital, and it's very difficult to get them out to the other end. And it was exacerbated over the winter because there was a particularly bad respiratory illness that kept people in hospital for a long period of time. So it's not as simple as just saying it's the government's fault. There is a particular collision of circumstances right now.
Okay, but is 16% of the budget at King's Mill is simply spent on servicing the debt? Your opponents have said that this hospital was built on a credit card.
So what I'm saying is QMC. So I'm so pleased that we've got this wonderful, state-of-the-art, beautiful hospital. I was in QMC last night in A&E, sadly.
But if we're crippled with debt for generations.
But how come? But it's like a mortgage. I couldn't buy, I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I couldn't buy a house outright. I need a mortgage. And that's what we decided to do, to pay it back over a long period of time. But let me tell you, let me tell you that there were no record A&E waiting times when we were in government. What's changed? They've taken their eye off the ball. They had a £3 billion top-down reorganisation of the NHS. They cut the social care budget, so we have got people who cannot leave their hospital because there's no Meals on Wheels, there's no care workers.
Gloria, the problem is
you can't get a GP appointment anymore, so people are going to A&E.
Gloria, you've got a mortgage, but that mortgage is going to take 50 years to pay off.
So would you still have people in Victorian hospitals?
No, of course I wouldn't. But we would fund it in a different way. We would fund it, as I've said earlier, through coming out of Europe, and we would also scrap the Barnett formula. Why should we spend £1,200 a year more per head in Scotland than they do here? And they don't pay for adult social care than you do here. We will change that. UKIP will change that.
OK, Phil Smith of the Liberal Democrats, you want to have a say on King's Mill?
Well, what I was going to say was, yes, King's Mill is a wonderful building, but it's cost too much. The way we've done it, the way it's been done here, is costing over 16% of the budget's being spent on just paying back the bills. Look, think what we could do if we had that to invest in the frontline staff and in operations and things like that. We just had a really bad system, and I think someone needs to apologise for it.
Are you going to apologise for it? Gloria De Piero?
Having wonderful hospitals with absolutely no problem in A&E. No, you know what? I will have a fight with anybody on the NHS. Absolutely.
OK. Mike Buchanan, Justice for Men and Boys on King's Mill Hospital. Yes,
it's not on the hospital, but it's on a Labour narrative about them, if you like, launching the NHS. The Conservatives were going to launch the NHS at the end of the war, but Churchill lost the election, and therefore it was Labour. It's an accident of history. It's not something that Labour can take sole credit for.
OK, thank you. You're listening to BBC Radio Nottingham. This is the live Ashfield hustings debate coming from the Festival Hall in Kirkby in Ashfield. It's 22 minutes past 6.
BBC Radio Nottingham.
Well, let's talk now about employment and public services. Of course, the days when coal was king around here and the textile industry could support hundreds of jobs are long gone. The Sherwood Park Enterprise Zone, just off junction 27 of the M1, has gone some way to replacing these jobs. According to the District Council here, it now employs around 6,000 people. But Ashfield still has a higher unemployment rate than the UK average. It's also ranked the 7th most deprived area in the East Midlands. Let's talk about sort of austerity measures then, shall we? Donna works in the public sector. Donna, that's a particular concern to you, isn't it?
Yes, I work on the front counter, and in our department many of the redundancies have been women, and the outsourcing roles that have gone were nearly all women, and my concern is the cuts have disproportionately affected women, and what are the candidates going to do to try and help with that?
OK, let's put this question to Phil Smith from the Liberal Democrats, first of all.
Well, as you've recently heard from Nick Clegg, the Liberal Democrats are guaranteeing a pay rise for public sector workers because we think that the public sector workers have unfairly suffered under the recent regime. So that's one of the things we're saying we'll do. The other thing I think that's important is that we look at the overall jobs market in Ashfield. We've got to attract people in here, and that's what the local council and the MP should be doing. And if elected, that's what I'll be trying to do.
Gloria De Piero for Labour.
I mean, you're right. if you look at all the tax and benefit changes that have come in over the last 5 years, 6 out of every £7 has come from women's pockets. Now, I think you do have to pay down the deficit, get the debt falling, but you have to do it fairly. And those who can most afford to pay more should pay more. But I agree about jobs here, and what I will always argue for, if I'm elected again as the MP for Ashfield, I just think about, we have powered Britain before in this area, and I think the green revolution can mean that we can power Britain again. And we need a government that is putting those jobs in areas like these, creating those green jobs here.
The Labour Party is still going to make cuts, though, isn't it? It's not as if you're standing on an anti-austerity measure. We don't have a Green Party candidate here in Ashfield. Your party is still going to make cuts.
Yes, it will make cuts in a fair way, but it will bring back, if you remember, the millionaires have had a tax cut under this government. We don't think that's right, so we'll get rid of that millionaires tax cut, and if you are earning a lot of money, you will have to pay 50p to get that debt down. But actually, ministers should take pay cuts too. So we say that ministers should take a pay cut of 5% until that debt comes down. So everyone has to share the burden, but those who can most afford it have to take the lead on that.
Mike, justice for men and boys, have the cuts been unfair?
Male unemployment nationally has long been higher than female unemployment, but initiatives under every government, left and right, all initiatives to attract, serious initiatives to attract people into jobs that were historically the preserve of the opposite gender, are focused on women. For example, £30 million is being spent on engineering.
So you're saying they're disproportionately affecting men?
I'm saying that disproportionately men, the unemployment rate of men is higher than that of women. And at Brunel University today, MSc...
Let's not get into statistics, if you can help it.
I'm sorry, well, statistics are facts, and if you don't want facts, then we have a problem. At Brunel University today, female engineering MSc students get given £23,000 more than males.
Ruth is a student, and she wants to have a say on this.
Hi, I'm a student. I've been accepted to the engineering course at Manchester. I've looked at the statistics, and we get paid more, if not a little bit less, sorry, not more, less or like the same as men. And I'm sorry that the government wants to put funding in, because 1 out of 10 engineers are women. And it's not because the women are like, we can't do it. It's because it's heavily male dominated.
Well, 1 in 10 psychologists is a man, but that apparently isn't a problem. Why is it only a problem when it's men who dominate these things? Women, far more men than women today, as always, want to get into engineering. But the important point I'd just like to say finally on this: the male suicide rate today is 3.5 times bigger than the female suicide rate, and that differential has doubled in the space of 30 years.
To talk about employment, I don't discredit the suicide rate at all. I agree with that. I think that's right. Earlier on, Mike, you said that men pay 72% of taxes in this country. That's because men have got the spending the earning power in this country.
It's because men tend to be...
because men earn more, because they're able to go to work.
No, men earn more because they're more likely to work full-time than women. Most part-time workers are women, most full-time workers are men.
I think that's what I've just said. And the cuts that are being made are mostly affecting women because they're affecting the part-time and the low-paid earners who tend to be women. It's a fact.
It's a fact that male...
Let's have a word from Helen Harrison from the Conservatives on this.
Anna's quite right, obviously, about women and why women earn less than men. Firstly, they're sort of guided towards jobs that are generally lower paid than men. So congratulations, Ruth, is it, on getting into Manchester to study engineering. I'm really pleased to hear that. It's traditionally expected that the people who take time out of work when they have a family are women. So I'm really proud of the fact that my party has introduced shared parental leave, which should help, if we can change the mindset of people in this country, it should help for women to be able to continue to work and continue with their career at the same pace as men. So I think that's really, really important. I think in schools we absolutely have to be pushing our girls to study all the things that are going to help them to get high-paid jobs in the future.
But have the cuts that going back to the question, the original question was to do with the cuts and the fact that they weren't fair.
Well, I think everybody agrees, most people agree that we needed to cut the deficit. I don't know if anybody really understands the difference between deficit and debt, but obviously deficit's the amount we add to the debt every year in borrowing to afford our public services. Our public debt is now almost 1.5 trillion, and it costs about £44 million a day in debt interest for us to service that. £44 million a day. I think it's actually higher than that now. Just think about what you could do with that £44 million if you weren't paying it in debt interest. We had to bring the deficit down, and we have to continue to do so that we can get our finances strong and so that we are able to afford our education services, our NHS, our hospitals, our roads, everything else that it is, our police force, all the things that we rely on. We can only have those with a strong economy.
Let's move on to UKIP. Simon Ashcroft represents UKIP, and the question was about public services and disproportionately affecting women and being unfair.
Well, as far as Ashfield's concerned, my priority will be to bring jobs to Ashfield. Gloria's been in opposition for 5 years, but she could still encourage businesses to come to Ashfield and to create jobs for both men and women. What UKIP will do is put a minimum wage of above £8, and we will reduce the taxation so that anybody on the minimum wage won't pay any tax. £13,200 a year you'll be able to earn before you pay any tax. But the real focus has got to be across the whole constituency, not just for women, across the board.
OK, it's 6:30. You're listening to BBC Radio Nottingham.
The heart of Robin Hood County.
BBC Radio Nottingham.
You're listening to the Ashfield election hustings on BBC Radio Nottingham. We're coming live from the Festival Hall in Kirkby in Ashfield. On the panel tonight, Simon Ashcroft representing UKIP, Mike Buchanan from Justice for Men and Boys, Gloria De Piero from the Labour Party, Helen Harrison from the Conservatives, and Phil Smith from the Liberal Democrats. We have an invited audience of women from Ashfield from all walks of life, and Peter Saul is BBC Radio Nottingham's political reporter, talking to some of them.
Yeah, well, we've just dealt with the question of unemployment, and of course one of the consequences of unemployment can be poverty, and there is a fair amount of poverty around here in Ashfield. Louise Regan's a local head teacher. You've got particular concerns about this, haven't you, Louise?
Yeah. I mean, I've been a head teacher in Ashfield for 15 years. I've been a teacher in Ashfield for 20 years. I think the situation has deteriorated rapidly, particularly over the last few years. We now have a situation where we provide a food bank at holiday times for our parents. I see on a daily basis the impact of poverty on my families, and it's not just people that are accessing benefits, it's low paid people who are on 0-hour contracts, who are not being paid a living wage, and I think that the impact of that on children and their education is disgraceful. So my question to the panel is, what will you do to eradicate child poverty?
OK, the first one to answer this, Gloria De Piero of Labour.
Well, the last Labour government took 1 million children out of poverty. The Tories and the Liberal Democrats have put 500,000 children back into poverty. Now, Louise is absolutely right. This is not just about unemployment, because half the people who are poor now are in work. Isn't that wrong? I mean, that old principle, a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. And that's what we are going to tackle. So when we boost that minimum wage by saying it's got to be over £8 by 2019, that is going to disproportionately benefit women. But I think you're right about the living wage. The time for the living wage has come, and we'll say to businesses, if you pay the living wage, we'll give you a tax break. So, yeah, absolutely, low pay is the essential here. And actually, since this is a women's hustings too, most of the jobs that have been created for women are low-paid jobs, 60%.
Are Labour going to make cuts to the welfare budget?
Well, do you know, that's a really good question. Yes, and I'll tell you why. So housing benefit has gone up. It has seen the 5th highest rise in Ashfield out of anywhere in the country. Do you know why it's gone up? Because of low pay. Because effectively now, because so many people are being paid so little, we have to top up their benefits, and that's not the right way. That's a waste of money for the benefits bill. You want to see people paying decent wages.
OK, the question was about child poverty, tackling child poverty. Mike Buchanan, Justice for Men and Boys.
I think a more important question for many voters...
But this is the question. Well, can you answer the question?
No, I won't do that, because you're stifling men's issues. Why does Gloria De Piero...
The question's about child poverty, which is a gender-neutral issue. It's everyone's issue.
You have set this up so that men's issues are not going to be debated. Why does Gloria De Piero perpetuate the myth that only women are victims of domestic violence and only men are perpetrators?
We're not talking about domestic violence, we're talking about child poverty.
I'm talking about it because the BBC never reports the truth.
OK, let's move on. Simon Ashcroft of UKIP. We're talking child poverty. What would UKIP do to tackle and eradicate child poverty?
Well, let me say, firstly, it's an absolute indictment on the two political parties, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, who have been in government here for the last 50 years. In 2015, we've got food banks in this country. It's an absolute disgrace. So what we will do in UKIP is make sure there's funding there. And yes, we can go over. Our manifesto is fully funded. It's the only manifesto on this table today that's fully funded. And we will make sure that those children are provided for.
If we're talking about child poverty, are you going to limit child benefit?
Child benefit will be means tested as it is now, but no, we've no reason to change it.
Is it not in your manifesto to limit it to 2 children?
Oh yes, absolutely. Sorry, yes, we will limit it to 2 children.
Why is that?
Well, because if you look across the spectrum, most families have 2 children, and we think that's a fair way to go.
Anna in the audience has a question.
What about maternity pay and leave? What are you going to make any changes to that?
Well, are we going to come back to on a health subject, or do you want me to deal with it now?
You can deal with it now.
Yes, well, we say that women should be protected in terms of their employment should be protected, and we will maintain maternity pay as it is now.
Okay. And a year's long leave.
Pardon?
And the maternity leave. As
yes,
it stands.
indeed, and also for males. I know we have a female audience here, but it's important that men participate in the upbringing of their children. I did, but I didn't have the opportunity to have time off work to do it.
Simon, thank you. Simon Ashcroft of UKIP. Let's move on to Phil Smith of the Liberal Democrats. The question was about eradicating child poverty.
Right, you can't eradicate child poverty with doing one simple thing. What you've got to do is, first of all, look at the fiscal side of it. That's why we want to increase the amount people can earn to £12,500, which will give an extra £380 into people's pockets, which of course will help. Also, it's aspiration for children. So if we increase money we put into education with the pupil premium and the way we're working with developing free school meals, then what we're trying to do is help that environment. Also, growing a strong economy. If you've got a strong economy, you've got jobs coming in, that's how you deal with it.
OK. Let's talk to Helen Harrison of the Conservatives. Child poverty.
One of the best ways to help to eradicate child poverty is obviously for families to have more money after they've worked. So we've cut taxes for the lowest paid, and we will cut taxes so that people on the minimum wage will pay no income tax at all. So far we've taken 12 million, we've reduced tax for 12 million women and taken 1.9 million women out of income tax altogether. I believe that our policy on childcare will really make a massive difference to women who want to go out to work. We're pledging, so far, 15 hours of free childcare for working women, well, working families, I should say, and we are going to increase that to 30 free hours. That's the equivalent of £5,000 worth of a benefit there to families who want to work and want to be able to support their children. I think that's absolutely vital.
And yet you're going to make £12 billion of savings from the welfare budget. Won't that affect children?
Well, I think it's really important that we do it very, very carefully. Of course, we're going to protect the most vulnerable from those cuts, so the disabled, the elderly and children. We have no choice but to make the cuts. It's 10% of the welfare budget, and I know it sounds like an awful lot, but we will do it very carefully and very sensitively, very mindful of families, because we don't want to see people in poverty.
And the coalition government has presided over this explosion of food banks. We've only just seen this week the Trussell Trust saying that they've been giving 3 days food out in a handout over 1 million times in a year. That's affecting children. Are you ashamed of that record?
No, I'm not ashamed of food banks. I'm really proud of food banks and the people that run them. I think that bureaucracy fails The main reason that people end up using food banks is because there's been a delay with them getting the payment that they should be getting. And we all know bureaucracy is not perfect. You're dealing with someone in an office, a computer, a form or whatever. These things sometimes fail. I'm really, really proud that the people of this country give their time and give their money to help people when they most need it. I'm absolutely thrilled that that's the way we are in this country. I'm not the least bit ashamed of that. I think it's something we need to be very proud of.
OK, Louise, you asked the question. You're a head teacher.
I am ashamed that we have to run food banks in this country. It's one of the richest countries in the world, and we shouldn't, our families should not have to depend on food banks to survive. You know, I'm not just talking about people on benefits that have had benefit sanctions. Often they can't access food banks because they're not able to. I'm talking about parents who are working, who are not paid enough money to feed their children, to heat their homes. We should not live in a society like that. But can I just ask how you would fund your 30 hours of free childcare?
Yes, of course you can. We're going to fund it with a reduction in the I'm not very good at these things. The tax relief on people who earn over £150,000 a year. So it is a clearly costed fund there. Now, in terms of the people using food banks, there are lots of causes. The main one was the fact that a payment doesn't come through in time. There's lots of other things, like a sudden unexpected payment. You're absolutely right. And I do, I agree with you that people should be paid a proper wage. And you might be surprised at me saying this, and this is not my party's policy. But I am supportive of the living wage. I would like to actually see everybody receive the living wage, because I think if you go out to work, you should be able to come away from work with your head held high and be able to support yourself. So I admit that is not Conservative Party policy, but it is mine. And it's something I'll fight for.
Thank you very much. Helen Harrison from the Conservatives. You're listening to a live hustings debate on BBC Radio Nottingham. It's 20 to 7 now.
The heart of Robin Hood County.
BBC Radio Nottingham.
On to education now. I know there are lots of people in this room that are particularly concerned about the issue of education, one of which is Irene Watson. Now, Irene, you're an administrator at a school in Sutton, aren't you? Tell us how things have changed for the way you've worked over the past few years or so.
Well, things haven't particularly changed for me. I work in a secondary college, an academy now. But the thing that I was particularly concerned about is a continual formal assessment of our children. Now we're here from the age of 4. We have students, I have a couple of colleagues whose children are age 6 and they're in year 2, they're coming up to SATs. They are stressed. For a 6-year-old today, to be stressed about exams, I think, is abominable, to be honest. They should be out playing, making daisy chains, doing art, going in, to parks. They shouldn't be stressed about getting the right answers to the right questions or getting answers to questions.
Well, let's hope we can get the right answer to your question. What is it?
Well, the question is, do you think that continuous formal assessments for children from 4 years old is right, and are they getting a rounded education, or are they being taught to the test?
OK, let's ask that question to Mike Buchanan for Justice for Men and Boys.
It's a disgrace that the state continues to permit the mutilation of the genitals of boys as young as...
This wasn't the question. You're here to answer the questions. So if you're not going to answer the questions, we'll have to leave it there. We haven't organised a hustings for you to have a platform for your manifesto. So we'll move on. Helen Harrison for the Conservatives. This was a question about testing in schools, and particularly at an early age.
Yeah, I have a huge amount of sympathy with your perspective on testing. I know myself that when my children were in primary school and were going through the SATs test, it was very stressful, and I was shocked that my children were stressed at that age, going through those kinds of tests. There must be a better way of doing it that doesn't involve getting the children really wound up and uptight about it. I think, we have to have testing at certain stages. There has to be some way of gauging how well our students are doing, and for employers to know how well people have done, and for universities. So we have to have some sort of formal exam system. But certainly I don't like the SATs tests, and I don't like the effect they have on children. And I do think the other thing that I noticed when my children were doing them was that for sort of the term leading up to doing the SATs test, all they did was practice SATs test, and over again. It's appalling. It's not teaching.
Isn't this your government presiding over this, encouraging this target-driven culture in our schools?
Well, no, I don't think so. I mean, SATs tests were introduced by the previous government. I think that we have got rid of at least one level of SATs testing, and I'd like to see us getting rid of more. As I say, we do need to find some way of testing our children, and I guess at the moment it's considered the best way, but I would be very dubious about that. I think we need to find a better way. And I would hope and put pressure on whoever's the next Education Secretary to look at this very carefully.
Okay, let's ask this question to Gloria De Piero, who represents the Labour Party. Would you continue with SATs testing throughout a child's education and at a young age?
I think it is important to monitor progress, but I don't want to hear about children being stressed. So it's really important that whoever is the next Education Secretary, and I hope it will be a Labour one, works with the professionals about the best way to measure that. But I do think I'm the first person in my family to go to university, and one statistic, and I don't like to bore people with statistics, but this one really sticks with me. So if you are from a poor family, as I was, you start school 16 months behind in reading age than a kid from the richest family. Now, there has to be a way to spot that early, intervene early, because I want people from working class backgrounds to get to university, to have a decent apprenticeship, to aim high. It's changed my life, but there's not enough examples of people from working class backgrounds.
Let's ask... Oh, Irene wants to add to that.
There's no need for formal testing. Why can't a teacher who knows that child assess that child instead of having to stress a child out to answer, to answer questions in an exam format? If I was a parent today, I would not let my child sit SATs, and I'm surprised that more parents don't actually say, I want to withdraw my child from SATs testing. Really.
Well, that's interesting. I haven't had any letters from it, but as I say, you are in the classroom, you are the professionals, and any Education Secretary should never alienate the profession, as I think Michael Gove did, to be honest, but he or she should work with you.
Okay, let's put this question to Simon Ashcroft of UKIP.
Hi. We're the only party that's actually pledged to abolish Key Stage 1 SATs test. We also want to abolish teachers' performance-related pay. Let's get back to teachers teaching kids and forming a relationship with those kids and educating them in a normal manner. We've become so engrossed with assessments and filling forms and data. Look, let's get back to properly educating our children and moving them forward. We have a proposal that says schools can be open from 8 till 6 at night, and we want children to be the future of this country.
You want to reintroduce grammar schools. Is the 11 plus not the most stressful form of testing?
Possibly so, but it's moving on from SATs tested, but also that's giving choice to parents. If parents don't want their child to go through grammar schools, they can continue as they are. But grammar schools offer real choice, and we say there'll be a grammar school in every town in this country.
Is it not creating a two-tier system where people can feel like they've been written off at a very young age? Many of the women in this audience may have been through that.
It's about choice.
A choice as an 11-year-old child?
It's about choice.
I think some of the women wanted to have it. Louise, from his head teacher.
I think our children are over-tested. There's not a teacher in this country that doesn't think children are over-tested. There is too much testing in our schools. Our children need to be children. They need to learn through play. Our teachers need to be trusted. Teachers are doing a really good job in this country. They work extremely hard. They work long hours. And what we need is an Education Secretary that trusts teachers, that works with teachers, that listens to the professional. I heard somebody last night say, when I go to the hospital and I have to have surgery, I expect my surgeon to be trained. Well, our teachers are all highly qualified, trained professionals, and we should trust them to do the job.
Okay. Phil Smith from the Liberal Democrats.
I've been a school governor at all 3 levels of schools. So I've seen these going all the way through the school system, and I think our children are over-tested. I would totally agree with what the head teacher over there said. I do think you do need to have assessments, but we're talking to teachers. Teachers do their own assessments anyway. And so we should be trusting our teachers to do that. And I think we seem to have got into an idea that we need league tables and testing for everything, when actually it's the result that matters. The children are important, and if we let teachers teach, we'll get children who have learned things and we can use them in the workforce.
What are the Liberal Democrats saying about this, about testing of children?
To be totally honest, the Liberal Democrats are saying that we need to be cutting down the amount we assess children. I don't know which ones they're taking out because I've forgotten, but they were talking about taking out one or two of the different assessment points, but I can't remember off the top of my head which ones they were.
Okay, so if you don't test children, how do you know where they are?
You use the teacher assessments. The teachers do assessments. You use the teacher's assessment. You use the teacher's skill. You can't just leave it totally to a school to go through, because we've seen failing schools in the past. I was brought in as a governor to a school that had failed. Sometimes it goes wrong. So you do need a certain amount of testing, a certain amount of external supervision. But you've got to trust the bulk of teachers who are doing a damn good job and working really hard.
Okay, Phil Smith, thank you.
Let's hear what do we make of this debate then? Let's go back to our head teacher, Louise. I mean, it is an interesting one, isn't it? The question of teachers under stress. Do you feel like any political party has got teachers on their side?
I don't think that there are many. I think lots of teachers are very lacking in trust, and that's because for many years now teachers haven't been trusted. We've had initiative after initiative. Workload has increased massively. There's a shocking statistic about the numbers of teachers leaving. We're losing teachers all the time, and you know, teachers are professionals. They're perfectly capable of assessing their children, moving them on in the next steps of their learning. We need peer assessment. We need schools supporting schools. I totally agree. If a school is struggling, what it needs is support. It doesn't need labelling. It doesn't need condemning, because that is what happens currently. It needs other schools supporting it, partner agencies working together. We need to build back trust instead of competition between schools.
You know, I think
This is Helen Harrison from the Conservatives, just to make that clear.
I think one of the greatest expressions of trusting teachers is the Academy Schools programme and the Free Schools programme. We're saying teachers know best how to teach. The thing that's disappointed me most with academies, I think less so with free schools, is that the freedoms that are being given to the heads and the teachers to expand the curriculum, use the curriculum imaginatively, do whatever they want with their children and use their own skills to teach those children. It disappoints me that our teachers in those schools are still just sticking rigidly to the curriculum, because I think you guys are the ones that know how to do it. I think you're the ones that know best, and we're trying to give those freedoms, and I really want you to use them. I think because you can take the education system, you can shake it up, you can show us how it's done, you can show us how to get the best results. Then other schools can look at schools that are doing really well and think, wow, what they're doing there's really, really working. Perhaps we can follow that best practice. I think teachers could be in charge and should be in charge.
Let's go back to Irene, who asked the question.
I think actually that education should be taken out of the political agenda, and I think it should be cross-party. Every time there's a change of government, there's a change of policy. I think Michael Gove had his own personal agenda. He's totally messed up the exam system. You know, next year we've got final exams instead of coursework, GCSEs, but it's not going to be a cut-off process. It's going to be something one year, then another subject the next year, then another subject the next year. Tristram Hunt said that in 10 years' time we're not going to have GCSEs. You know, we need some cohesive agreement between all parties that this is how we're going to look after our children.
Okay, Sue is a retired teaching assistant. Nodding your head at some of that.
Don't tell everybody. Yes, I am, and I've worked with children from the age of 2 to 16, and then I do agree, and I agree wholeheartedly, because I've done assessments, I've done teacher assessments, same as the teachers have done. When you do your own, you know your children. You can see that little so-and-so is doing well. You don't need somebody politically to say to you, this is how you're doing it. And you're quite right, every time there's a change of government, everything goes up in the air again, and then we have to start again. It's like reinventing wheel. Sorry.
So, Gloria, what you're proposing from Labour, Gloria De Piero, is another shake-up, another change. Is education, as we're hearing here from these women, is education too important to be tossed around politically?
Well, actually, I went to Hillock School with Tristram Hunt, and he did say what teachers need most is stability for a bit. No more messing about. With just have some stability so you can plan. But what is also our promise is that children in primary school, that's us, class sizes, they're creeping up again. We're not having it. Class sizes below 30 for 5, 6 and 7-year-olds. But also another thing, you know, private schools, they get some very generous charitable benefits. If you are called a charity and you get some tax benefits for it, then you have to do something for it. So what support, what access, what playing fields are the private schools going to provide to work with the state sector too?
Okay, thank you. Gloria De Piero of Labour. Final quick word on this from Simon Ashcroft of UKIP.
Thank you. Irene, you're absolutely right. And if we could all be adult in this country and say, let's depoliticise two things. One's education and one's the NHS. And let's have a platform for building for our future, not just this bat and ball each time we change government. So if one thing can come out of this, if we have a hung parliament, is that we depoliticise NHS and education.
Well, we're coming to the end of our time here at the Festival Hall in Kirkby in Ashfield for our live political debate. You've been listening to the issues affecting the residents here, the women in the audience. So time for a last word from our panel. I want to ask all of you, in 1 minute, please, if you are elected on May the 7th, what kind of place will Ashfield be in 5 years' time? Start with Gloria De Piero of Labour.
Well, the independent experts, Institute for Fiscal Studies they're called, they gave their verdict today. They said another Tory government would mean more extreme cuts in the next 5 years than we have seen in the last 5 years. That means cutting support for family, that means fewer Sure Start centres, cutting tax credits, cutting child benefit, fewer police officers, fewer nurses. We can't afford another 5 years. So, a Labour government will balance the books, but in a fair way. A mansion tax on properties worth over £2 million to fund those 20,000 more nurses, 8,000 more doctors, guaranteeing those GP appointments again within 48 hours, 25 hours free childcare for working parents of 3 and 4-year-olds, guaranteed breakfast clubs and after-school clubs at primary schools, banning 0 hours contract, cutting those energy bills, raising the minimum wage to over £8 and giving every young person a job if they've been out of work for a year.
Helen Harrison for the Conservatives. You have a minute.
Thank you. My ambition as your MP is to be a good, hard-working, honest local MP. I don't have ideas of grandeur. I don't see myself as being the next Health Secretary, the next Prime Minister, any of those things. I simply want to be the person who listens to you, speaks for you, acts for you, gets angry on your behalf when necessary. And so, in me, you'll have someone who listens and cares.
Phil Smith from the Liberal Democrats.
If I was your next MP, what I'd want to see would be more jobs coming to Ashfield, and I'd be working hard for that. I think we need to work with the local teachers in education, because I think we need to invest in education. That's a very key point in our manifesto of how much we're going to put into education. I also think it's key that we look at apprenticeships and going and continuing education, not just stopping at 16, going into vocational training and into getting more people into universities. I also think it's really important that we protect our environment. Currently, we've got around Ashfield some wonderful green fields, we've got a lovely environment, we've got to keep that. And I think that if we're not careful, we're going to end up having more and more pressure put onto that by developers who want to just develop willy-nilly, and we've got to make sure that doesn't happen.
Thank you. Phil Smith of the Liberal Democrats. Mike Buchanan, Justice for Men and Boys.
Yes. If you elect me as your next MP, the human rights of men and boys will get onto the political radar for the first time in the world. The men in Ashfield who vote for any of the main parties will be turkeys voting for Christmas. The biggest turkeys will be those voting for Gloria De Piero, who, of course, was selected from an all-women shortlist, an abomination in a democracy. Ashfield voters deserve the best person for the job, not the best woman. She is, of course, Minister, the Shadow Minister for Women and Equalities. There is no Minister for Men, needless to say. And you can be sure that if Labour are elected, we will see the most anti-male government in British history, with feminist bigots such as Yvette Cooper running major departments. Women and girls are also damaged by the state's assaults on men and boys. I'm not ashamed. I'm not remotely ashamed. No, I will stand up for the rights of half the population. So I ask you to vote. I ask you to vote for me, both men and women. Let's make a difference. Let's treat men and boys as human beings for a damn change.
Okay, let's go to Simon Ashcroft of UKIP. You have a minute.
Thank you. We all need to stand up for common sense politics. Prior to this crazy coalition, we had 13 years of a Labour government who presided over the worst economic disaster for nearly a century. Prior to that, we had the Tories, who opened our doors to all comers with devastating unemployment. It's time for change. It's time for UKIP to deliver change for this country. In Ashfield, the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party can't win. Over the last 5 years, there's been an economic earthquake, a political earthquake in this country. Only UKIP can keep Labour out of Ashfield. Vote UKIP.
Simon Ashcroft, thank you. Well, thank you to everyone on the panel. Mike Buchanan, Gloria De Piero, Simon Ashcroft, Helen Harrison and Phil Smith. A reminder that a full list of the candidates standing here in Ashfield and in all the constituencies in Nottinghamshire can be found on the BBC election website. Next week, we're going to be in Sherwood, Pete.
We are indeed, yes. Sherwood, one of our other really tight marginals here in Nottinghamshire. Again, very tight race between the Conservatives and Labour, and we've had lots of ministerial visits to Sherwood over the past couple of weeks or so. The likes of Ed Balls visiting, George Osborne has been there as well. So, you know, this is one of the key seats, and again, we're hoping for a lively debate. Thank you ever so much for all of you guys for coming along, looking at all the ladies of Ashfield here. I hope this makes you feel like you can make a more informed choice in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, we had some undecided voters at the beginning. Has anybody been swayed or had their minds made up by what they've heard tonight? Hands up? They've been swayed. They've been swayed. Yeah, some people were already decided before they came here this evening. So thank you from the Festival Hall in Kirkby. Thank you for joining us, the women of Ashfield. Thank you to the panel, and a reminder, tomorrow morning there'll be another election hot seat with Mark Dennison in the morning from 9 o'clock.